So, now we kind of begin our answer as to why a good God, a loving God, and an all-knowing God might let evil happen in the world. Well, Christians believe that God has got a plan which allows evil and suffering to happen, but that plan is actually beyond the comprehension, beyond our understanding of your average human, or any human. Some people might argue that, a good God would not allow evil and suffering in the world. If that's the case, there's a number of options. Well, maybe God doesn't exist, maybe God's not all-powerful, or maybe God is actually responsible for everything, and so, including the evil and suffering, so maybe God isn't good. Well, none of those suggestions would really be kind of palatable to your average Christian. So, one of the arguments that put forward to explain the existence of pain and suffering is the Adam and Eve story. That Adam and Eve disobeyed God in the Garden of Eden, and as we mentioned before, the fall, original sin, those kind of things. But why would a God allow them to disobey and choose evil if he, the perfect creator, had created perfectly? Well, some explanations. One guy, particularly Irenaeus, he was a monk who was around 130 to 200 AD, said that people needed to suffer and needed to be made to choose between good and evil. Otherwise, they would just be like kind of robots, really. They needed to have some sort of choice. And God wants people to choose to actively worship him. But then you might ask questions about, well, why do innocent, say, babies suffer? They're not. What have they got to learn from that experience? Another famous writer, another Christian monk this time, St. Augustine, who was around about 200 years after Irenaeus, believed that evil was just a lack of good. Evil happens when people choose not to do good and live according to those standards that God has set for human beings. So it just means that evil isn't really a thing in itself, but it's just simply what is left when no good is present. Another story you might be familiar with is the story of Job. The story of Job is in the Old Testament. Job is a good man who worships God and lives a good life. A figure called the adversary, we can read as Satan or the devil, asked God's permission to test Job to see how devoted he is to God. God is confident of Job's devotion and gives permission to be put to the test. Job loses his wife, his children, his animals, all of his wealth, and then finally his health, but he doesn't lose faith. And finally he is rewarded by God. So suffering there perhaps is a test. So in summary, the key people, Adam and Eve, the first men and women who introduced original sin into the world. We've got the adversary, the person who makes Job suffer. Sometimes we call him Satan or the devil. We've got Job, a man who suffered as a test of his faith. Something to bear in mind actually, that sometimes in life, if Job actually got his reward in his own lifetime, he was actually rewarded twice as much as he had before. But perhaps sometimes the reward may not be able to happen in this life. Say through somebody suffers and dies, their reward won't be on this earth, but it will be in heaven, Christians would say, in the kind of paradise. Back to the key people, we've also got Irenaeus, a Christian saint who said that people needed to suffer, otherwise they'd just be like robots because they wouldn't actually have to choose anything. And we've got St. Augustine, another Christian saint who believes that evil is just a lack of good. Something to remember. Non-believers might say that all human beings have a choice to behave. They can either choose to live their lives and behave in a way which is good for themselves and for other people, or they can live in a way which might seem good for them but is damaging to others. So that concludes some of the explanation, and Christians might say why we suffer.